Now with our series Crossing the Line, where we focus on sexual harassment in the workplace. The EEOC tells us that 3 out of 5 women say they've experienced sexual harassment on the job, and there have been more and more high-profile cases of harassment reported just in the last few months. Our business correspondent Rebecca Jarvis is here. She sat down with a diverse women from different industries to talk about this.
Yes, George, good morning to you. We sat down with 10 women to talk to them about what it's really like on the job and to understand what women in the workplace are facing today.
I've been sexually harassed.
Touched and propositioned.
This is my experience.
Their voices part of the 60% of women who say they've experienced workplace sexual harassment.
I felt isolated,
vulnerable, small, unsafe.
We brought together 10 women from 10 different industries, from finance to hospitality services to government, to hear their experiences.
I worked in restaurants for 10 years. Every time I walked into the kitchen, someone would whistle.
This person used guilt tripping to try to get me to do sexual activity as compensation.
He would just stare at me really weird.
I've spent 25 years in the financial services industry. There was inappropriate behavior that would happen on a trading floor.
According to government statistics, the finance sector is one of the industries most prone to sexual harassment. But as you're about to see, sexual harassment knows no occupational boundaries.
How many of you have been sexually harassed over the course of your career? Leave your hand up if it's more than twice. More than 3 times.
And then a shocking drop in hands.
How many of you filed an HR request against your harasser?
Statistics show that 70% of women who experience workplace sexual harassment never report it. Why? The fear of job retaliation.
I think it always feels like an uncomfortable choice, and I have to really think about my values and what's important to me and weigh them against my career.
I often feel like in the grand scheme of things, I'm just not that important to this company. In that moment, I feel like there's an erasure of yourself.
And yet all of the women facing the problem in their own way.
I just left, never returned back. I didn't even try to get a paycheck.
I work in engineering with a bunch of guys, and I'm very upfront with them, and I tell them, look, you're going to make comments, I understand, but the minute you start going after me, we're going to have issues.
Jenny Yang leads the federal commission tasked with investigating and litigating charges of workplace harassment. She says gender-based put-downs can also be a form of sexual harassment because it's harassment based on one's gender.
Sexual harassment is very much about power, but sexual harassment does not always involve propositioning. It can involve demeaning comments, crude language that makes women feel like they're in a hostile work environment.
How many of you have been referred to, show of hands, as a girl, a doll, a babe, or honey at work?
Sweetheart belongs on that list as well.
How many of you have heard you're too emotional?
You're being too emotional. Now don't get so emotional. That's the new word for sexism, and they put you down. But if you say anything, you're emotional because you're a woman.
And when we asked what can be done to stop this behavior,
it starts in the home, and it starts with the parents, and it starts with our discussion with our young men and saying this is not okay.
And from the family room to the boardroom.
It starts from the top. It requires your leadership to message clearly that harassment is not tolerated.
And a message from our forum of women in the workplace that part of the solution may lie within us.
I'm raising my voice because I want to be an agent of change.
To encourage other young women
That they too can take a stand.
To break out of silence.
I'm speaking out against sexual harassment because it exists.
Because it even exists. Because it exists, and it shouldn't.
And it shouldn't. And as you saw there, when we asked how many women filed a complaint with HR after experiencing or witnessing harassment, just 2 of them did, which is typical in these situations. Statistics tell us as many as 70% of women do not report it. And what happened next is very telling. I asked how many of you felt your report was met with something positive. Every one of those women put their hands down. I was also struck, George, and we were talking about this, by this idea that it starts in the home. Leslie, one of the women on the panel, raised this idea that you have to teach your children, relatives, siblings. We have to be doing a better job of drawing the line in the home and teaching these positive attitudes.
Boys and girls.
And girls.
Okay, Rebecca, fascinating stuff.